Start webinar. Okay, we're going.
Good morning, everyone. It's 8:30. We're going to get started with the Portsmouth Traffic Safety Committee this morning. Councilor Bagley is going to be probably about 30, 45 minutes late, so I will start the meeting so we can get going on time. We will start with our call to order and attendance.
Okay, Mary Lou McElwain.
Here.
Steve Pesci.
Here?
Mark Syracusa.
He's online now, if you want to promote him.
Oh, good.
He's still an attendee, I think.
Harold Whitehouse.
Here.
Erica Wygonick.
Here.
Police Captain Mike Maloney.
Here.
Assistant Fire Chief Bill McQuillan. Absent. Public Works Director Peter Rice.
Here.
City Manager Karen Connard.
Here.
Chairman Andrew Bagley. Do I mark him absent or what?
Soon to be here.
You can mark him
Let's
here.
see if he actually shows up, right? So yes, yeah, he'll be here.
I tried to promote Mark to panelist, but it doesn't seem to be working.
Is it something he needs to do on his end? No?
Just introduce
Mark,
her.
we're trying to promote
Introduce
you from attendee.
Yeah, well, hey, thank you for recognizing me this morning. Just couldn't make the meeting physically. So the last meeting, I made a comment to someone in my office while on Zoom when my microphone was on. I'd like to apologize to the speaker, the public, and the committee members for the interruption. I just wanted to acknowledge that.
Okay, thank you very much,
And,
Mark.
Mr. Chairman, can we welcome Leela to
Yes.
to our staff and to the PTS meeting? Leela will be helping coordinate and admin and basically tell us all what we need to do.
Great.
Welcome.
Thank you, Leila.
Happy to
Welcome.
be here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to move on to the financial report.
Okay. And
He is, he's still in.
Nope.
Acting Mr. Chairman, before I make a motion, does the city council see these reports? Because they are quite interesting to see, you know? Do they?
I can try and answer that.
They do?
We provide parking updates on a regular basis, certainly
yeah.
as part of the budget conversation. We've had many of these, and I believe either Peter or Ben or I have mentioned
Yeah.
where we are at relative
I
year
see.
to date.
Yes. I'm very impressed with the percentage sometimes.
It's amazing.
Draws my attention. Mr. Chairman, Acting Chairman, I will move the financial report be accepted as presented.
Okay, we'll accept it. We're waiting to, oh, there we have it on screen, just so the public can see it. So we have a motion to accept. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Mary Lou. Any comments?
Oh, I'm sorry. Mary Lou, second. Who?
Harold was the
Okay,
motion,
Harold.
yeah. Any comments on the financial report?
A lot of money.
Good to see the revenues coming back
Right.
as we return to normal. Okay, if there are no comments, I'd like to call a motion to accept the minutes, or excuse me, the audit, the unaudited financial report.
If you have a motion, we just need to vote, right?
Yes.
It needs to be roll call.
Yeah, roll
Yes.
call, please.
Mary Lou McElwain.
Yes.
Steve Pesci.
Yes.
Mark Syracusa.
Yes.
Erica Wygonick.
Yes.
Police Captain Mike Maloney.
yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice.
Yes.
City Manager Karen Connard.
Yes.
Okay.
Unanimous, thank you.
Harold?
Harold, we missed Harold?
Could you forget me? I made the motion.
Oh, well, I assume, I'm sorry, Harold Whitehouse.
Yes, yes.
How could we forget Harold?
I didn't mean to.
Okay, we're going to move on to public comment period, item number 4. Typically, we start with people in the room. If you'd like to come forward and pull the mic up to you and identify yourself, and we ask, and we ask that all of our speakers try to limit their comments to 3 minutes today.
I'll try to do it in.
All right, thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Dave Underhill. I live on Pinehurst Road. I sent a two-page letter, which is in your packet. I won't reiterate it. But I'm delighted and grateful that after that, or as that process went forward, this team took our streets concerns very seriously. You've looked at the intersection, you've looked at and made recommendations on changes. It appears to me the data you collected is supportive of what I suggested in the letter before the data occurred. That's always nice to see. I think if you had sampled over the weekend, you might have found even higher speeds. It would not surprise me, because I think there is a difference between how locals behave on South Street and others. The sample motion in the agenda, to me, appears to be very, very good and addresses the concern. The only other thing I would suggest you think about is the possibility of a no parking here to corner sign on Pinehurst, because vendor trucks particularly park right in the intersection. And I know you're not supposed to, but they forget. So with that said, I'm grateful for your look at it. I hope you will adopt the sample motion cited in 6A. I'm happy to answer questions about my submission, and otherwise grateful for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Welcome.
Hi there, I'm Allison Melcher, also a resident of Pinehurst. Excuse me, I just echo most of what Dave said, and I just wanted to thank you all for your time and attention to this dangerous intersection. And as you know, many of us who are not here today and couldn't be here because they have young children, the speeds in that area are a concern for all of us, knowing that our kids will be riding their bikes on the street and moving on to schools at some point, and eventually moving on independently without us with them, and that's pretty nerve-wracking. Also, just the traffic going in and out, driving to and from school is kind of a hairy experience sometimes. So thank you all for your time on this.
Thank you.
Hey,
Good morning, everybody. My name is Chuck Collins. I live at 3 Little Harbor Road. I wish I was here to echo some great successes we've had on considering speeds on Little Harbor Road. This was brought up a year ago during the heavy use season of Little Harbor Road, with camps and recreational people on the Little Harbor Loop Trail visiting the Wentworth Coolidge Mansion. And the committee has taken action at that point to do some speed monitoring of the street, and other actions that have been taken since that time has been to remove about 20 trees along the edge of the road. We've also repaved the road to make it a nice smooth surface. And we've cut the brush back along the side of the road, increasing the sight lines of Little Harbor Road so you can see even further down. End of June begins the camp season again for the Gundalow Camp and the people down at Creek Farm. It'll bring more traffic down for people recreating down the end of the street, using the sandbar as a great refuge to go swimming and put their lawn chairs out at low tide. I'm disappointed that I'd learned that the committee has just decided to do nothing, basically. From what I understand, I'm sure I'll learn that there's been other actions taken. We'll sit on it, we'll survey it, we'll watch it, and see what happens in the future. Well, my fears of what might happen in the future. I guess really, what I really need to know as a concerned citizen and resident of that street is how I am aware of these committee meetings. I do go to the website frequently, and I noticed this one, how I make sure that the agenda items are on the committee's meeting and what the minutes are from the meeting after and what has been decided. I've scoured the website and I am not able to find a way to do that. So at some point in a breakout, if somebody would be kind enough to show me the right way to find that information, I would be very, very grateful. If anybody can give me any kind of update. I noticed there was a pedestrian cam down there sometime in probably March, April timeframe, and another covert speed camera, but I don't know what the results of any of those are. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Yes, is there anyone else in the room who would like to speak? Okay, we'll go to Zoom. Do we have any hands raised?
Yes, we have first hand raised is Annie Pubo.
Okay, good morning, Annie.
Good morning. Thank you for taking my comments. This is Annie Poubeau from 160 Bartlett Street. I'm calling for 3 different items today, all 3 in my neighborhood. The first one is Cottage Street. There's a lot of pedestrian activity with a new senior center, Westman Yards, connecting through Cade Street to Cottage. We see a lot of people walking. There's no sidewalk on on large portions of Cottage Street. So if you truly favor traffic safety over traffic flow, you should not encourage speed. And I am personally against raising the speed limit on Cottage Street. My second item is Bartlett Street. There's a proposal in the packet today for a rectangular flashing beacon at Bartlett and Pine Streets. There's nothing wrong with adding a beacon, but it should not be thought of as a substitute for actual traffic calming measures, which are badly needed on our street, on Bartlett Street. RFBs are traffic flow management tools, no different than stop sign or traffic lights, and we see drivers ignore them. So please keep that in mind. And then my third point is not in the packet. It's about the intersection at Bartlett and Islington. Why is there no crosswalk connecting the corner where Two Brothers Garage is to CVS? It's a very exclusive walk signal. Why do pedestrians have to cross Bartlett, then Islington to get to CVS? Why inconvenience pedestrians or even put their safety at risk? I see in the packet the proposal for changes at the intersection with Joel Court, which is really close. So maybe it's a good time to also add a crosswalk. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, Annie. All right, do we have anyone else?
Oh, yes. Justin Richardson is the next.
Good morning, Justin.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. Justin Richardson at 586 Woodbury Avenue. And the reason I'm coming in today is that for a long time, I've had a concern about the speeds on Woodbury Avenue, and in particular, the final stretch as you come down the hill from where, I can't remember the name of the church that's at the top of the hill, but as you approach going down to the traffic circle, it's where I live. At Edmund Street, there is actually a bus stop, and people who are in the Jewel neighborhood or Gemstone Estates neighborhood have to cross Woodbury Avenue, but there's no crosswalk anywhere near there. Traffic's regularly going 50. People are driving like they're already on the highway. I'd like to suggest that, and if this is already under consideration, I apologize, but I think what is sorely needed is the type of improvement that was made on Maplewood, where there are these rises in the road that are very manageable at speeds of 25 or even 30 miles per hour, but eliminate the 50 mile per hour traffic, which is a real significant concern. I've never seen anyone measuring the speeds that are traveling on Woodbury Avenue, but they're terrifying, and truly terrifying. So that's my only comment, really. I'm hoping if this is already under works, maybe someone could make a few brief reference to that, because I don't really know what the status is. But I'd love to hear what the follow-up may be. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
Next person is James Christie.
Good morning, James.
Good morning. Hello, everybody. Yeah, my name's James Christie. I live on Jones Avenue, and I'm calling in to comment on the proposed or discussed RRFB that might be going in on South roundabout where Broad meets South. Just wanted to say that I'm definitely in favour of that, with a couple of caveats. That whole sort of area is very iffy for cyclists, for pushchair users, or anyone with an accessibility need because of the broken up sidewalk there, connecting Broad to the intersection at Sagamore and South. So beefing up the sort of the crosswalk that we've got there to being an RFB would be an improvement. Certainly, I've got 2 young children, one who goes to Little Harbour, the other one who goes to the middle school. They both like to cycle to school. And yeah, currently, they've got to either cross Sagamore in traffic to do so, or, deal with the very busy crossing down at the bottom of the Broad. One of the other commenters did say that not all drivers seem to know what to do with an RRFB, and that has also been my experience. I have seen a couple of people at the RRFB at the top of further up Sagamore at the graveyard just sort of blow right through that even when the lights are gone. I think maybe there's just not that much public awareness of what they are, perhaps. So that's one consideration. Another one is, in my observation, is that people coming up South Street, crossing Sagamore and then carrying on up South Street, often tend to accelerate fairly hard at that intersection. You see people sort of really start to speed up there. So they've only got a very short space between the intersection and where this RRFB would be going in. So I'm wondering if this committee would consider any other traffic calming measures in addition to an RRFB to ensure that incoming traffic that way is not going too fast. I guess you could say the same for people coming down the hill from South Street as well. They tend to go pretty fast. Overall, I think it's a much needed improvement, and would definitely improve access to town and to school for my family and many other families in my area who are otherwise a bit cut off by these 2 busy roads. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next person is Brian O'Neill.
Good morning, Brian.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Brian O'Neill. I'm on 815 South Street, and I'm here to support the group that's in there already talking about the speeds on South Street. Just reiterating the comments that others have said. The speeds are pretty fast coming down the hill. For me, I have to come to a complete stop when I turn into my driveway before I can see the cars coming the other way. There was a problem in the wintertime too, where there was a ton of cars sliding off the road due to the high speeds and icy conditions. But yeah, I just wanted to thank the committee for considering this issue.
Okay, thank you.
Next person, Aaron Prohl.
Good morning, Aaron.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. Erin Pro 99 Martin Ave. I just want to thank everybody for the work that you do for our city, and thank you for allowing me to chat. I'm just calling in support of the RRFB that's being proposed for the intersection of Broad and South Street, and also just echoing James' comment regarding the sidewalk in between Broad and Sagamore, where there's a tree, the roots have grown up, and it's very difficult to pass for anything with wheels, bikes, strollers, and we have 2 young kids that go to Little Harbor. They do both walk and bike to school. I think that it would be a great addition for safety reasons for this to be added. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
That's all I have for hands raised.
Any final Zoom comments? Going once, twice?
I think you have a comment that someone typed in.
Is that a
Chat comment?
More? Oh, yes. Anna K. Vorstig from 35 Pinehurst, writing in to express our family's thanks for your actions to address safety at the intersection of South and Pinehurst.
Okay. Thank you, Anna. Seems to be a lot of support on that. And for the record, we do have follow-up under old business on Woodbury Avenue and South Street to Broad, so we'll come back to that. All right, I think we can close the public comment period. We have no presentations under item 5 today, so we'll go to new business. Item 6, First item is South Street at Pinehurst Road.
Okay.
So, Eric,
Yes, let me bring this up on the screen. Oh. Okay, it's not the best. I think I'm showing a few different pages here, but
has a formatting issue.
Yeah.
Figures so big. There we go. Perfect.
okay. So this is a diagram here showing the area around the intersection of South Street and Pinehurst Road. In the middle here is Pinehurst, and at the end to the right of the page is the intersection with Broad Street, and to the left is the intersection with Union Street. So we, city staff measured speeds and sight lines at the intersection as well as turning movement counts at the intersection. And what we found was the average speed along South Street in the area of Pinehurst Road was measured at 28 miles per hour and an 85th percentile of 31 miles per hour. So sight lines are based on the 85th percentile speed, and which is 31. And what we found is for the intersection sight distance, which is a driver pulling out of Pinehurst and looking to the left up the hill, they can see 256 feet, which is sufficient for speeds of up to 32 miles per hour. So the intersection sight distance does meet the minimum criteria, and that is probably why you're not seeing a high amount of accidents at the intersection. However, what is lacking is the sight distance for drivers approaching the intersection on South Street. As they come over the crest of the hill, their sight distance is limited to only 188 feet, which is sufficient for speeds up to 26 miles per hour. However, as said, the average speed was 28 and the 85th is 31. So we really want to have a stopping sight distance of greater than the 188. And since we can't increase the stopping sight distance because that would require rebuilding the road and lowering the hill, the other option is to address it from the speed standpoint. It's something to lower the speeds on South Street to bring them down to the 28 to 26 miles per hour or less. Which would be making them come into compliance with a posted speed limit of 20 miles per hour. So I have a couple of recommendations on this chart, and this one is to put up another speed limit 20 sign, which is consistent with the rest of the street in advance of the intersection, probably somewhere up around Union Street, as well as installing one of the speed feedback signs that tells drivers how fast they're going. Combine those two, they realize what the speed limit is, and hopefully that gives them time to react and lower their speed to at least 26 miles per hour. In addition, put up one of these intersection warning signs with the street name of Pinehurst Road underneath it, and that would be in advance as well, so the drivers know that on the other side of the crest of the hill there's an intersection where it could have traffic pulling out. Those measures would be something that we can do fairly quickly to address the speeds in the area, and these speed signs usually have an effect as far as driver education. It wouldn't be enforcement, but it would be alerting drivers to the conditions of the roadway. And as mentioned, another item that could be done is to install the no parking here to corner sign. Per state law, when you have a stop sign intersection, you should have no parking within 30 feet of the stop sign. So that would bring it back to about that first driveway here at the bottom of the page. So that could also be done. And these measures could be done fairly quickly, once, if the committee agrees with these recommendations, and then it would go to council for their approval.
Can I?
Erica, yes.
One question. I got the impression, I don't know what's right, but I got the impression that trucks are also parking on the other side of the road, and that might be almost more of a concern when people are turning in. They're coming down the hill and turning in, and then there's the vehicle there.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have the authority to put in no parking? I know the state law with the stop sign helps us on the east side of the road. On the west side of the road, can we say no parking for 30 feet on that side also, or is that something we have to go to
the
city
state law
council?
on South Street would be no parking within 20 feet of an intersection because they're not under stop sign control.
Oh, no, I mean on Pinehurst, on the west side of Pinehurst.
Oh, on the west side, yeah, that you could put 30 feet as well on that side too. Yeah,
I think it would be, personally, I guess I think it, I mean, I don't know. I don't go by there enough to see when the trucks are parked there, but I get the impression that they're parking on both sides, so I think that would be a good idea.
Yeah, yeah, because when someone parks on there, you're basically having a one-lane road.
Yeah, it's too close to.
Yes. Mary Lou.
Thank you. Also at the sidewalk, someone mentioned that these delivery trucks are parking on South Street at the corner. So I'm wondering if no parking
Here.
sign should be put up there also.
Yeah, that is something
That
else.
area where they can pull in.
Along this area here, we could post no parking within
Yeah.
20 feet of the intersection here.
Yeah.
And as well as on this side here.
Right. Blocks the visibility coming out of.
In this side here, within 20 feet of the intersection, that's a state law, so we could put those signs up. And there wouldn't be any approvals needed for that. That's just a signage in conformance with existing
you.
laws.
Harold.
Yeah. Also on the sidewalk, it was mentioned extending the sidewalk on South Street, turning into Pinehurst. Can the staff comment on that? Is there money available?
Well, I can comment on the locations. The existing sidewalks are shown in this picture along the south side of South Street between Broad and Pinehurst and all along the other side. But where its sidewalks are lacking is this section here west of Pinehurst Road along this side of South Street. There is no sidewalk. There is a crosswalk at this location. So what could possibly be done, there appears to be enough land within the street layout to construct a sidewalk along this side of the roadway. However, there is grading and there's ledge here, issues that would have to be dealt with. So you'll most likely need a retaining wall along here. And it'd be a little bit more of an effort than a typical sidewalk would be. But I don't know if Peter might be able to address the funding for it or the time frame. I know we have a paving project that's coming along soon on South Street, and as part of that project, we'll be installing a line of curbing on that side of the roadway. So if there is a future sidewalk, that work would already be done.
To answer that, Mr. Chairman, we are looking at what resources are available. We do have monies that are allocated every 2 years for sidewalk work. The intent was to commit that money already to other projects. However, we may have some residual funds available, and the CIP is structured to allow for miscellaneous additional sidewalks to address situations just like this. So we're currently reviewing where we're at. The bids for the sidewalks are currently out. So once we have those, we'll have a better feel for available monies, whether we can add that or not. But as Eric mentioned, as part of the road project, we've asked to add curbing along that edge so we don't have to rework the edge of the road when adding the sidewalks. When monies are available.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter.
Question, Peter. I'm sure we have a queue of sidewalk requests in CIP or just public requests that have been made. So what's the metric used to evaluate one need versus another?
Typically, there's a number of things that we look at. Safety is one of the higher elements, obviously. Connectivity, does it complete a section of sidewalk that's currently not connected? So there are a number of sidewalk projects out there. One would think sidewalks would be something that everybody would be clamoring for, but oftentimes when we move forward to do a sidewalk, there's folks that don't want sidewalks. In this case, we have heard no negative feedback about this proposal. So we are proceeding with the assumption that this is an acceptable project.
Because one of our comments this morning, someone was speaking to Cottage Street as well.
Yeah.
So, I'm sure there are always more needs than we have resources for these. But.
Absolutely. And, Bartlett Street, Cottage Street have all been part of a discussion. We had a public meeting last fall. There's, that area is in review in terms of what traffic calming measures and upgrades are going to be done. It's just a matter of, we're already in this area. We already have defined work going on for South Street. So it's something that if we're there already mobilized, it probably makes sense to take care of it.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Mark Syracuse has his hand
Yes,
raised.
Mark.
Hi, yeah, thank you. The 778 South Street, there was an email that was brought in by the Korn family. Their concern is that, not a beacon light, but it's a light, that flashing overhead light, Peter, that goes over the roadway.
At Union?
In the future, will
Pinehurst,
that
yeah.
be taken out, or will that be, is that standard anymore? Does the city still use those or install them?
Yeah, it's a standard traffic management technique. We use them in a number of places throughout the city.
Is there any alternatives to that light based on their input?
Like, we can review alternatives, but, there's alternatives would be what? Rapid flashing beacon. It's really, the need for that location is that there's ambulance traffic going to Edgewood off of Union Street. So it's really to make people aware that there's a busy intersection that they're coming to, or potentially busy intersection they're coming to. So I know Eric could speak better to, what other options are out there.
Yeah, because that overhead beacon is for that intersection of Union and Edgewood, and there is somewhat of a blind curve as you're coming inbound on South Street, coming around that curve. You don't see that fourth leg of the intersection, so it's a warning device for that intersection.
Okay, so that's been evaluated probably numerous times over the years as definitely a safety feature. It's just unfortunate that, their email complains of it flashing in their bedrooms, but,
That light has probably been there for decades,
It's a long
right?
time. It has.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's still of use.
yeah, okay. That was my only comment, thank you.
Any more comments on this proposal? So we have a recommendation from the city engineer for some improvements, and we've had some additions of no parking here to corner signs, which can be done right now under state law and local ordinance. Erica?
Parking
Is that a
current-
motion, Mr. Chairman?
I think he's looking for a motion.
I'm looking for a
but
motion.
I was going to
Yeah.
interrupt quickly. Is parking allowed on South Street at all right now?
I believe it is.
And people just don't do it because there's not
Yeah,
enough
it's just very difficult to do.
space.
Yeah, essentially, parking is allowed on any street unless it's prohibited.
Yeah.
So it would have to check on the ordinances to see if it was prohibited.
I'm happy to make the
Yes, I was
motion
hoping you would, Erica.
as listed, and then with the additions of the no parking.
Here to corner.
Second?
All right, we have a motion and a second, a roll call vote.
Okay. Mary Lou McElwain,
Yes.
Steve Pesci.
Yes.
Mark Siracusa,
Yes.
Harold Whitehouse,
Yes.
Erica Wygonek,
Yes.
Police Captain Mike Maloney,
Yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice,
Yes.
City Manager Karen Connard.
Yes.
Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you. Item B, Bartlett Street at Pine Street, request for an RRFB crosswalk. We have a sample motion put forward by staff. Eric, do you want to give us an update? Okay.
Street at Pine Street. I'll try to get this.
And Councilor Bagley's here, so I'm going to demote myself and relocate myself. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Apologies for being late. It was double booked this morning.
Did you take the red eye?
No, I was in town, but
I think we're at item 6B.
item 6B, Bartlett Street at Pine Street.
Street, yes.
Request for RFB at crosswalk by resident. And a sample motion would be to move to refer to staff for review and report back at future meeting.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman. Okay.
All right.
Can you make, we go by Roberts. In other words, the chairman can make the motion if he wants to.
I think we generally avoid doing that. So somebody else will make the motion, and then if we have a second,
For purpose of discussion, I'll second, and then maybe Eric can
speak to it.
speak to it.
Okay. Is that on the screen? No. I believe it is. Okay. This is the crosswalk located at the intersection of Bartlett Street and Pine Street. This is the nearby playground on Pine Street. So we have put out a camera at this location. We collected data over a weekend. We just got the data back. It's not in your packet at this time. We had the camera out there for a total of 39 hours over 3 days, and we saw a total of 14 pedestrians in those 39 hours. The most we saw was 3 pedestrians in 1 hour. So it doesn't really raise the high priority list because of the volume of pedestrians crossing at this location. But we do have another project we have started the public process on, is the traffic calming for Bartlett Street. So I think this may be a better opportunity to maybe do some traffic calming and pedestrian improvements as part of that project. This doesn't raise to the issue of being something that seems to need to be addressed immediately. We have, especially with RFB, where the significant cost, and we have other locations where we have seen a need for these devices. This doesn't seem to be a critical need as the other ones do. I mean, there is traffic on here, and they're traveling faster than the 20 miles an hour, but we're not seeing the heavy pedestrian volumes at this location. But we can continue to monitor this and report back, or at the pleasure of the committee.
Steve?
I would like to support the concept of waiting and dealing with this request as we look at the street in total. I totally empathize with the request being made. I appreciate the data, but I think we would be better to hold this request and deal with it comprehensively as the Public Works Department comes back with the proposal for Bartlett Street.
Mary Lou?
Yes, thank you. At one point, we decided that we were going to talk about where these beacon requests are coming from, and kind of do an overview of what is in the city right now and how we prioritize. So I'd like to, there are 3 requests on today's agenda. So I would like to see us do a more comprehensive look at the flashing beacons before we make approvals on all 3. Thank you.
Erica?
Well, a bunch of us are in a speed working group to address regular concerns. Would you like to head up a RFB working group?
Let's see. Let me think about that for 5 minutes. But I think it's a great idea, yeah. Where's our intern? Where is Tyler?
He's not an intern, yeah, he's a full-time employee. And he actually earned a vacation, so we let him off. Yeah, we let him go.
My
We let him
God,
go for a week.
already?
I know.
Good job, him.
Yeah, he reached probation, and he's like, I'm done, I'm going.
Tyler does great work for us, sir. I'm
Yep.
saying that in jest,
I know
obviously.
you are.
So should we rescind the motion and motion to place on file, or do we want to continue to evaluate this?
The motion's okay for the
Motion's
purpose
okay.
of study and report back, that's okay.
Okay, with the anticipation that we probably wouldn't do anything until the traffic calming project gets started and underway.
Right.
Good.
Do we need to vote on that motion, or we're just going to
Yeah, I think we
lay it on
do.
the table? So I would support the motion with that interpretation that it will be part of the Bartlett Street review.
Mark has his hand raised. I don't know if that's residual.
No, I think it's new.
I will take it down.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Eric, do you want to promote him to panelist?
Yeah, I've tried that,
15
but
times.
it doesn't.
You might have an older version.
Okay, yeah, why don't I join, should I stay as an attendee or join as a panelist?
Join as a panelist if you can, on your end.
You have the option.
Yep,
All right.
there we go.
That way you can participate more regularly.
Now I really have to be careful, all right? All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so all those in favor?
We have to.
Well, we have to do a roll
Oh,
call.
roll call. vote.
Mary Lou McElwain,
Yes.
Steve Pesci,
Yes.
Mark Siracusa,
Yes.
Harold Whitehouse,
Yes.
Erica Wygonek,
Yes.
Police Captain Mike Maloney,
Yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice,
Yes.
City Manager Karen Kennard,
Yes.
Chairman Andrew Bagley.
Yes. All right, on to 7 on the agenda, old business. Item A, Woodbury Avenue traffic calming update on alternative options.
Okay. So at the last meeting, we were asked to come back with some other alternatives for the intersections along Woodbury at both Dennett Street and Rockingham Ave. This first diagram. It's a little hard to see, but this is an overlay taken from the design plans that we had drawn up several years ago by a consultant for this corridor. And this is the intersection of Woodbury Ave and Dennett Street. And what was proposed at that time is to put in a median island, which is hard to see, but it's right here where the Woodbury is. Median island at this point, and with a pedestrian crosswalk, and this would be a gateway treatment coming into that lower section of Woodbury Avenue. The rest of this would be paint, and they would be expanding the roadway alignment. This alignment would actually tie in nicely with the new alignment on the bridge. When the state rebuilt the bridge over the bypass on Woodbury, they widened it, and so now there's a little bit of a misalignment, a jog going through this intersection with the northbound ramp. And this proposed improvements at this intersection of Dennett Street would align the roadway with that new alignment over the bridge. And it would also provide a better pedestrian crossing, a two-stage pedestrian crossing here at the intersection. And the island would act as a pinch point that would help to slow traffic as they're coming into the section of Woodbury. The traffic really seems to just keep on coming until they get to that 90-degree bend up by Cottage Street. And so this would help to let them know they're coming into a different area of Woodbury Avenue. The next slide we have is some other alternatives, very rough at drawing here. This would be a mini roundabout at the intersection of Woodbury Ave and Rockingham Ave. This could be done with some type of raised treatment or paint, bollards in this area. It's a mini roundabout, so trucks would have a difficult time, but trucks would be able to just, cut the corner on this or drive over it. And because there's a truck restriction in this area, we don't get a lot of heavy truck volume. Something like this is effective at slowing down traffic as they need to maneuver around the roundabout. This measure has been very successfully implemented in many cities around the country in residential neighborhoods. There would be some minor reconfiguration needed so that you move your crosswalks possibly out of the way of the travel path. You don't want a vehicle coming in and then swerving around and into a sidewalk, a crosswalk as they're maneuvering the roundabout. So, but that is something that could be done. Another option is the next slide. Is this? We looked at this intersection again at Rockingham, and there was comments about possibly making a protected bike lane up here along this side, or doing some other bicycle treatment. But because of the desire to have a median island in here, such as at Dennett Street, that the alignment, you need to keep the through lane on this side north close to the sidewalk and to allow your through movements to go through. You wouldn't want to have your through movement in the middle with a wide bike lane, because then your through traffic is running into an island. But there was also a desire to get rid of the left turn lane there and make the left turns from the through lane, which acts as a traffic calming measure. The left turns would stop and slow traffic behind it. So that is where we came up with this proposal to put a raised median island that would allow a two-stage crossing similar to the island on the other side of the intersection. There is no bike lane on this section of Woodbury, so the bike lane coming under the overpass ends at this point, and bicyclists either have to share the road the rest of Woodbury, or they take a left and come down Rockingham and get onto the bicycle trail here that comes over the bypass. So it didn't see the much benefit of increasing the bike lane on this side. It's a wide bike lane right now, but it goes to nowhere. So being able to cross pedestrians and bicyclists safely at this intersection by putting in a raised median seemed like a better alternative than trying to do something with a travel lane in the middle. So these are ideas that we just wanted to bring back to the committee as a request to see what other options could be done rather than the previous plan that had been shown.
Mr. Chairman, I notice attendees raise their hand. It's past public comment, and I make a motion to allow Justin to speak.
I'll second that.
Do we need a vote on that?
Yes, we do.
So I guess we'll need a roll call vote.
Mary Lou McElwain? Steve Pesci?
Yes.
Mark Siracusa?
Yes.
Harold Whitehouse?
Yes.
Erica Wygonik?
Yes.
Police Captain Mike Maloney?
Yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice?
Yes.
City Manager Karen Connard?
Yes.
Chairman Andrew Bagley?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, before we leave the issue, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah. When a roundabout is proposed, do the engineers take in consideration the tractor trailers on that street? They do?
Yes.
Okay.
That's why it would have to be something mountable if we were to do that, or a much larger circle such as at Foy's Corner over in Rye, where trucks can maneuver around the entire router. That would require significant more road work and land takings to do something that large.
Thank you, Edward.
So do we want to hear from Justin Richardson? Thank you. I believe I'm unmuted now. Just two comments. One is on the comments about the bike lane on the opposite side. That is, I bike all the time to downtown along that section, and that left side is or the upper side on the plan is the better one because it avoids bicyclists being running into the intersections of the traffic, turning onto the traffic circle. So in this, I guess it's the north side. That's a much safer side to bike on. And there is enough space. You are correct that it does cut off right before as you're coming from Woodbury Avenue down the hill. The other question I had about the mini traffic circle or roundabout issue is whether that would cause traffic congestion, because it's very difficult to turn out of driveways along this section of Woodbury Avenue because cars are going both directions. They are going fast, so slowing them down that would be a great aspect. But I wonder if really the better solution might be to put one of those raised like traffic curbs, I forget what they're called, rather than a roundabout, which could cause the traffic to back up. And you'd have people essentially stuck waiting to go around the roundabout and unable to enter because of the volume coming up and down Woodbury. Folks on Rockingham wouldn't be able to enter into the traffic circle. Those are just my thoughts or comments on that. I'd love to hear if there's any reaction or response to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Is there any? Steve?
Oh. Mr. Chairman, one of the challenges with Woodbury Avenue is its designation. Its designation is an arterial road, and design criteria don't really acknowledge or recommend raised tables, traffic, those types of traffic calming measures in an arterial road as designated. The designation is not something that the city creates. It's the Rockingham Planning Commission and the state DOT that define those designations. And so, we wouldn't want to necessarily, go counter to those recommendations or those design requirements. The concerns relative to the roundabout are really it's more of an inconvenience or something. It's just a change that people are not necessarily used to around here, but it does not create a larger queue. It actually reduces queues because it makes it a very predictable movement of traffic through the roundabout. But I would be interested in piloting it and seeing if it's something that is an acceptable treatment. It's used in many places throughout the country successfully, and I think it's one tool in our traffic calming toolbox that could be tried out and just monitor it and see and report back in terms of, and we don't have to pursue it, but it would be interesting to try it as a pilot effort. But I would be interested to hear other people's feelings on it. The alternative configuration, if the pilot for roundabout was not acceptable, I think the way Eric has shown it is with this additional median is probably the best approach to address this issue. But I'm interested to hear others' thoughts on this.
Thank you. Steve? Or?
I'd like to hear Erica's comments first.
If you were first.
As an engineer, yeah.
No, I really like all these designs. I think they're great. I think they're nice steps forward. I love mini roundabouts. I would love to see them in our neighborhoods as neighborhood calming. I think they're really great options that I would love. I'd love to pilot that in my neighborhood. I volunteer my corner. I don't know if people will be, I should probably talk to my neighbors first. I use it as a mini roundabout sometimes if we need to change directions probably shouldn't say that out loud. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. It works really well. Yeah, for parking, because we only have parking on one side of our street. I think they're great. They're great for traffic calming. They work well. Trucks can navigate them. I think it certainly could work in this location. I don't have strong feelings which would be better. I wouldn't have thought of one here, but I don't think it's a bad idea. I think it's interesting. I think piloting it, I think it'd be great if we wanted to pilot a couple of them and volunteer my road, which I think it's a great use for a bike corridor that, I can't remember the title we're using. Boulevard. It's a great way at like either end of a bike boulevard. I'd love to see us try some. I think that'd be great. But I like the design that the other two designs Eric's put out there. The one comment I'd like to make is I'd really like for there to be some landscaping involved. I think it really makes a really big difference with speeds to have some plantings and not just paved. A median helps, but it also creates a sense of just this paved paradise, right? Not a human-scaled environment. So I think to the extent, it doesn't need to be trees if there's not enough space for trees, but even bushes or neighbors can adopt the traffic circle or the mini roundabout or the medians just to, I think that makes a really big difference. So I'd love it if that could be added. But otherwise, I really like all those designs.
Steve and then Harold.
I think a great example is at the little neighborhood garden spot at Thornton and Woodbury, which is a little diamond, and it's just a little bit of annual perennial landscape, and I think it really changes the feel of that intersection. I totally support introducing these, I call it a mini diverter, mini roundabout into Portsmouth. I think there's a lot of great neighborhood streets where this would be an excellent traffic calming device. It's inexpensive. It's simple. It doesn't create any dangerous situations. I don't know that I think this is a great spot for it, and I worry about doing a pilot of something that might be great in the wrong spot, and then forever people say, oh, not that. That was terrible. So I want to support the other design you presented, Eric, for this corridor, and I really appreciate what I call the eastern or the southern end by the hotel. That is really important, what you've shown as the protected crosswalk there and fixing that whole area. So I guess I support either, but I would like to see a pilot of the mini roundabout diverter in other locations in town and go with your more traditional alternative presented for Woodbury. And I think those improvements would be very appreciated by people who live in and travel through the neighborhood.
Harold?
Question to the Public Works Director. Do we have to be very careful in reference to federal and state funding, what we do in that story, right? When we talk about roundabout, would that jeopardize our federal or state funding?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Those are federally accepted treatments for roadways.
Okay, all right. Thank you. I didn't know that.
Yep. And Mr. Chairman, if I may, I acknowledge Steve's point relative to a bridge, not a bridge too far, but floating out a treatment that becomes an episode instead of a program. I think I agree with what you're saying and retract my thought about trying it out here.
Okay.
I think it'd be a better place, a better location to do it. Not in Erica's neighborhood because it seems to be preferential treatment.
It's just based on my lots of observations. I think it'd be a good location.
But I would.
I can get good neighborhood buy-in too, I think.
I think it'd be something to move through the committee in an appropriate manner.
I'd also point out, as Peter mentioned, in an arterial roadway, a mini roundabout is probably not the best way to be on an arterial roadway. You'd want to have a full-size standard roundabout on the highway. I was showing that because it does fit, but it's really not the best solution here.
Just trying to get me excited.
Yes, I know.
I thought these were called diverters because I get very concerned with people people interchangeably say traffic circle, which is like our traffic circle, then roundabout, which is smaller. I thought these were even tinier and called diverters, no?
No, sorry.
Go ahead.
A mini roundabout is what
Okay.
Eric has drawn. And I think the question really has to do with the volumes, and I don't know if you've looked at them yet, whether it would work in this location. I've been joking about the idea of testing it in my neighborhood, but I actually think it would be a great pilot because it is the bike boulevard and the volumes and things, but I set it aside as like a personal advocate. A diverter usually involves limiting through traffic in a particular
Okay.
direction. So it might be like almost like a winged curve in
Yep,
the middle,
yep.
so you can go this way or this way, but you can't go
Got it,
through,
got it,
for
okay.
example. There's various, you can have it so bikes can go through, but cars can't.
Okay.
There's lots of options like that, but that's what I would consider
A mini
diverter.
roundabout.
But this, I think, is a mini roundabout. And just to build on what Steve said before about the hotel end, that's the end that I think really needs well, I think they all need plantings, but I think that really has a lot of potential to be a really nice neighborhood gateway with plantings would make a really big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of them would be good with plantings.
Kenneth
We would need to,
Will we suspend the rules to allow Justin? Do we need to do it again?
Yeah.
I don't think it was specific to Justin, though. It was just to let some
Yeah, 'cause
talk.
he had his hand raised at the same time as Justin.
I would say we interpret it as acceptable.
Yeah, we don't have an attorney here to tell us we're wrong. So let's go ahead. Kenneth, do you have something to add to the conversation? I think, is he muted?
I don't know if he could hear you. You weren't talking into the mic.
Oh, Kenneth, do you have something you'd like to add to the conversation?
Give them permission to.
Oh, there we go.
Hello?
Yes,
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh, hi. My name is Kenneth Ferreira. I live in Woodbury Avenue there, just above in 115. And I just wanted to echo that I do agree that traffic calming solutions, some of them are very positive. The circle is interesting, the other one. And I would stress that we look at the other minor intersections between Maplewood and Rockingham and Woodbury, because a lot of the speed I see walking down, biking down that street happens there. I mean, that's where the police post themselves, right there at the church, to try to catch somebody speeding. That's where most of the speeding happens, right in between Maplewood and Rockingham Avenue, and not necessarily in the intersections. So traffic calming on the non-intersection portions, I could see if you guys have looked at that, like the road diets or something like that.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Steve?
So are we looking for a motion on Eric's recommendation?
I think,
I'd like to propose one if we are.
is that what you're looking for, Eric?
It's a pleasure of the committee, I mean, at this point, how you want to go with this.
I would say yes, we are.
Okay.
This is an update. I don't know where we go from.
That was fine. I just wanted.
I don't know that we wanted to presume that a motion might be made, but we're.
Well, I would like to make a motion. So I would like to make a motion that we support the traditional design, the non-mini roundabout designs for both sections of Woodbury Avenue as presented by the city engineer. I think they're a significant safety improvement, and I think we should support moving forward on those as designed.
I'll second.
Can I make a friendly amendment? And identify a location to test a pilot mini roundabout elsewhere in the city.
I don't support that friendly amendment.
That's
I think it should be treated separately.
That's fine. I know.
Okay.
All right, so without the friendly
withdraw
amendment.
my friendly amendment.
Okay, I will comment about the mini roundabouts. I do believe in the Elwyn Park traffic calming study, there was mention of a mini roundabout. So I might put that forth as a possible, because I too would like to see these mini roundabouts in places where they make sense, and that might be an easy place to start.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I would encourage us to separate the two issues.
Yep. Okay.
And treat them as clearly
Separate.
distinct proposals.
All right, so let's take a roll call vote on the motion. for this particular intersection.
Okay, where are we now? I'm
So
lost.
we're on the,
Oh, I don't have one of those fancy things.
We're on Woodbury
Oh,
Avenue.
okay,
traffic
all right,
calming
all right.
update.
I know that. Okay, I know that. Okay.
we're going with that
Steve
proposal.
made a motion.
Okay.
Steve made a motion and Mary Lou seconded it.
All right.
You should be able to get to the.
Oh, no, it's right here.
Mary Lou McElwain,
Yes.
Steve Pesci.
Yes.
Mark Siracusa,
Yes.
Harold Whitehouse,
Yes.
Erica Wygonik,
Yes.
Police Captain Mike Maloney,
Yes.
The next one up.
Public Works Director Peter Rice,
Yes.
City Manager Karen Connard,
Yes.
Chairman Andrew Bagley.
Yes. Go back to the agenda. Old business, item B, Islington Street at Rail Trail entrance, update on citizen request for RRFP. Sample motion would be move to install RRFP, crosswalk and tip down ramp on Islington Street as funding allows.
Mr. Chairman, we've collected some data out there at the intersection. We're seeing, about 15 pedestrians an hour crossing, in the early spring, good weather. I only expect that number to increase, so it certainly would appear to support the warrants to putting a crosswalk in at that location. And it is on the apex of a curve, so the sight lines are very good out. It's actually the best spot out there for a crosswalk because the sight lines are good in each direction. And, it's our RFB could be also helpful, just to alert drivers to a new crossing in that location. Although, watching the video, pedestrians are not having a hard time crossing the street. Most of them, I think, 2/3 of the pedestrians in the videos were not having any delay whatsoever. They were just coming up and just walking across the street. There's plenty of gaps in traffic. When they are waiting for a gap in traffic, they're waiting about 5 seconds. So it's not a hard place to cross the street. So, a crosswalk looks to be warranted, and RFB possibly could be put in at a later date if needed, or it's a desire of the committee because they are. We do get requests for them in many places, and this would not be a high priority in my opinion, but it is a good location for a crosswalk.
Steve?
I would like to make a motion that we install a crosswalk with appropriate vertical crosswalk signage, maybe the pointer arrows as well, and then monitor for consideration for future RRFB installation.
Second.
Okay. Mary Lou?
Yes, I just wanted to comment that in other communities where there are rail trails, there is a significant crosswalk, and often the RRFP be on them. But it seems that if you're coming out of the rail trail, you need to cross over Islington Street to go north into town. So that to me would be more of a concern than seeing a few pedestrians crossing at that point. And I would agree with Steve's recommendation, his motion.
Can I make a parallel comment? We traversed this during the mayor's bike ride several weeks ago, which, by the way, I want to thank the city staff and the police. And we had, 50, 75 people, all age ranges. It was really a great event. So thank you for everyone that participated and helped on that. But thinking long term, someday we hope to have the rail trail completed from Portsmouth to Seabrook, and this is going to be a major crossing, and certainly at that point, will become a major RRFB, whatever. But I think this is a great first step if we can.
Okay. And I'll just add a comment. This particular access point isn't really that noticeable if you're not already familiar with it. So putting a crosswalk there, I think, might draw some attention to people to let them know that they can access this pathway. So I think it's a great motion.
Yeah, Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I second that motion. I don't know if anybody heard me, which Steve said, is to do it in increments where you put the crosswalk in now, then reevaluate it for a beacon light or something else in the future. That could be done in the short term, right, Peter?
We have to do a tip down. So, short term is, it's a matter of getting, well, I believe we have the funding to do it. So, painting is an easy thing, but you need a tip down to access it, to make it ADA compliant. So we'll strive to get it done as quickly as possible. And I'm not sure what our availability in terms of staffing, whether we have a contractor available to do it at the moment.
Steve, can you repeat your motion?
Yes, but before I do that, I have one final question. This is for the engineers, MUTCD. Would that be appropriate to have is there such a sign that shows a ped and a bike symbol crossing? Because I think that's what this is. It's like a trail crossing, right? So
Yeah.
there is a different sign that's
Well, it's not part of the trail. It is just a crosswalk at this point.
used by bikes and peds. Anyway, I'll leave that for you guys to sort out.
Steve brings up a good point. It is a short section of shared use that bicyclists will be coming off of Vine and crossing that section. So I can see incrementally adjusting the area depending upon volume of traffic and need to potentially either making a shared use path section of the sidewalk or making doing some sort of further treatment in the roadway to make it clear that there's bicyclists as well as pedestrians crossing. But I think in the near term, the incremental approach is the way to go, and if we have signage that can do both, that's great.
Yeah. I think that sign can be put up, the combination of the pedestrian and bike on there.
So my motion, sorry, Harold.
I just want somebody to bring me up to speed on this rail trail. I'm not too familiar with it. How far does it go? And where does it go?
It goes all the way to Massachusetts.
I see, yeah.
The state is currently in design. They're looking at construction, I think, next year.
Is this the B&M rail?
It's a former Boston Main Railroad.
Okay, yeah.
The state owns the corridor now.
I see. All right. I'm falling way behind.
So I'll just restate the motion.
Yes.
That we move forward with the installation of a crosswalk with vertical signage and necessary tip downs as a first step, understanding that it is also a trail crossing, and leave it to the staff to determine the appropriate MUTCD signage for that.
Second. It's a long motion. Second.
All right, and we'll take a roll call vote.
Mary Lou McElwain?
Yes.
Steve Pesci?
Yes.
Mark Siracusa?
Yes.
Harold Whitehouse?
Yes.
Erica Wygonik?
Yes.
Police Captain Mike Maloney?
Yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice?
Yes.
City Manager Karen Connard?
Yes.
Chairman Andrew Bagley?
Yes. All right, old business, item C, South Street at Broad, update on staff request for RRFB.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've been continuing to collect data at this location, looking at video to see, how pedestrians are crossing and how the traffic conditions are out there. So what we've seen is that there are a couple times during the day, especially, it seems to be school pickup and drop-off times when traffic is backing up from the intersection at the signal at South and Sagamore and comes back to as far as Broad Street. And we've been watching to see if pedestrians are coming out, but we haven't seen a lot. I mean, maybe 5 instances a day where a pedestrian is coming out between those cars that are queued up. It seems to be that pedestrian traffic and cars are not heavy at the same time. I think it's people are all coming to the school or walking to the school, and then the traffic comes to pick up the people out by car, and then they're leaving, and then the pedestrian traffic picks up. So it's been working well watching it on the video. It hasn't been a critical concern where a lot of pedestrians are coming out between those stopped cars. So, as traffic increases for the summer, we can continue to look at it, but we haven't seen the critical need at this point yet for the RFB. I mean, certainly we could put up the static signs, the regular yellow diamond signs with pedestrian crossings, as we just discussed for Islington, but not yet seeing the critical need for the RFB. The drivers are allowing pedestrians to come out. The drivers are stopping so that they're not blocking the crosswalk, even though they're on either side of the crosswalk. And the pedestrian activity hasn't been heavy when the vehicle queue has been there. But we can certainly continue to monitor it.
No motion is necessary on this one, right?
This is an update on what's happening, so.
Yeah, so we'll just continue to monitor. Erica?
Sorry. One of my I have a couple of concerns with this location, and it's part of kind of this whole area. I'm not as concerned with people crossing in between stopped cars. I'm more concerned with people crossing when cars are moving, because they're going, the speed data indicates that they're going pretty quickly. and seeing the pedestrians and stopping for them in those locations. I don't know what the video has shown. For me, I think the concern is just, this is effectively a safe route to, or what we're telling people is a safe route to school for that quadrant of town. We've just discussed the South and Pinehurst neighborhood. You know, we're encouraging them to come down to this location to cross. We have all the folks on Broad and back that whole neighborhood who will need to come this way to cross, unless we want kids crossing Sagamore, which I think that could be a great spot for them to cross and go through the cemetery, but in effect, I think this is probably a better location. So I don't know. I just want to advocate to make sure that we're thinking about the whole comprehensive plan of getting kids safely to the schools in this direction. And I'm curious what your observations were in terms of not when the cars were stopped, but when they were moving, how that appeared to work from a safety perspective.
Yeah, I mean, there certainly is a lot of pedestrian activity at this intersection. We're seeing a lot of traffic, pedestrians on Broad Street crossing at this location, continuing up Broad Street. And if the sidewalk is removed on the other side of South Street to that last block, there'll be more pedestrians crossing as well. So, you know, we've seen the pedestrians crossing without an issue. I mean, they are waiting for traffic for a gap in traffic and crossing, but there hasn't been any close calls, but it is a heavy pedestrian location. So you have the traffic, you do have a pedestrian light down at the intersection of South and Sagamore, and it seems to be when that button is pushed down there, that's when traffic gets stopped and when the traffic queues up back to the Broad Street intersection. So,
But the people coming down Broad won't be able to get to that intersection anymore.
No.
When we take the sidewalk out.
Yeah. And that sidewalk section on South is only from, right now, from Pinehurst to Broad, well, to Sagamore. But that last section would be removed between Broad and Sagamore. So it's a, you know, it's a tough call because it is working well now, but there is a lot of pedestrian activity at that location.
Mary Lou?
Yes, thank you. When is the sidewalk work going to be done where the tree, the roots are?
When are we going to pull it up?
Yes, because I would imagine when that work is done, the pedestrian traffic will increase, as Eric mentioned.
Yeah,
That intersection.
I'm hesitant to pull the sidewalk up.
You're hesitant to pull the sidewalk up because it'll affect the trees.
Well, because it'll impact, I wanted to get some consensus here before we did anything. Obviously, we're very cognizant of protecting the trees. We also are very cognizant of, trying to protect the pedestrians.
Right.
So right now, it's a heaved sidewalk, but people are using it. They know it's heaved. There's no delusion that it's an ADA compliant sidewalk, but it is still a section of sidewalk that people are comfortable enough to navigate. So for that reason, I'm hesitant to pull it out.
Hi, Peter? I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mark.
My question was, is there any plans in the future for enhancement, traffic safety enhancements at the lights on the corner of South and Sagamore?
No.
Okay.
It was just up, right?
Yeah, it was done a while ago.
Oh, so people are using that pedestrians are using that intersection to cross?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
One concern has been raised about if RFB was installed at Broad Street, that drivers often will stop, until those lights stop flashing. And if they're coming out of town on South Street and they come to that flashing light, they may stop, which would then cue traffic back up into the signalized intersection. So that's another thing to consider. We don't know if that would happen or not, but it is a concern that's been raised.
The reason why I brought that up, and this came up before indirectly with Peter and I when I was talking to him, is that if you take those trees down, it's going to lead. We're not going to need to have some kind of crossing. People can go down to the roadway, but then young families are going to say, well, that's too busy of an intersection. We don't feel comfortable. But then again, how do families feel when they're crossing on the corner of Congress and Islington Street, which is, in my view, I'm not an engineer, is comparable when it comes to traffic versus pedestrian crossing. So, I've tried to alleviate putting in that beacon light and to have people use that intersection as it is. But then again, too, the catch-22 is taking down old trees and putting a sidewalk in there.
Yeah, there's no support for taking those trees down.
No, there's not.
So I mean, your concern relative to the function of I assume you're talking about the South and Miller-Sagamore intersection.
Correct.
It's working very well.
Yes.
So there's no issues at that intersection.
And people
Right.
use it to cross. I mean, I
Correct.
think families are using that intersection. I don't think they feel unsafe crossing there, Mark.
Yes, and they can go from, there's a sidewalk, so if you're living on Jones Avenue in that neighborhood there, in order for them to use that intersection, instead of going down Broad, they would go down Sagamore. But they would have to, there's no sidewalk on the, the west side? You'd have to go on the other side where there is a sidewalk, so you have to cross somewhere. I'm just trying to think of that neighborhood and how they can use that intersection safely, or if they can use that instead of using Broad Street to cross.
Steve, you had a comment?
I've always felt that an RRFB is not appropriate here when you're one block from a recently updated, safe, fully signalized crosswalk intersection. So, and this speaks to Mary Lou's point about thinking about the metrics for where we consider RRFBs and not, because we're getting a lot of requests for them. So my feeling is that this is not a highest and best need for an RRFB. So I would not support one there. Crosswalk potentially, but not an RRFB.
Erica?
In response to Steve's comment, I agree that we're close to a signalized intersection that works well, but if there's a barrier that prevents people from getting to that signalized intersection, I think that's, it's a false option for them. If they can't get to that intersection safely, it doesn't matter that that intersection is close by. But I recognize that an RFP might not be desired at this location. This is, I think, the only significant crossing of one of these larger roads that school kids use to get to school that doesn't have a crossing guard. Could we, instead of an RFB, consider putting a crossing guard there during school times?
We can consider, we currently have a crossing guard at Miller and South.
But that doesn't help.
I know it doesn't help that location.
Yeah.
It'd be just too,
They'd
the
close
other
by.
thing we could consider is moving that person over and then rely on the kids to use the buttons, which is not necessarily, being.
I have a question for Eric. I'm sorry, Eric, are you done?
Peter was talking.
Oh, I'm sorry, Peter. Go ahead.
I'm finished.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Mark.
Is there any video showing people walking past the old trees and the old sidewalk? Because the public work is going to remove that sidewalk and put lawn in there. Instead of lawn, can it be some kind of natural path so people can use? That is really tight. I've walked that several times between the roots of the tree and the fence. But it is walkable. It's just making it smooth without taking down the roots. That's an untouchable too. I mean, does any video show that people are still walking?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I've observed people going through it with strollers and bicycles, and people use that section of sidewalk.
Okay. So even though it's based on the condition, even if the sidewalks was removed, people will still be using that. Okay.
And we don't need a motion on this. We're just going to continue to monitor.
Yeah, it's just an update.
All right, so let's move on, because we've spent quite a bit of time on that item. Old business, item D, State Street Crosswalk at African Burial Ground, report back from NBB 4.7.22. Oh, that's a date, okay.
Oh, yeah.
I was thinking that was like an RSA or something.
No, it was first on the agenda. So we've been collecting video at the State Street crosswalk at the African Burial Ground and watching that. We have not seen issues with traffic yielding to pedestrians at this crosswalk. We do have one of those in-street pedestrian yield signs on the rubber base, and that seems to be effective. Pedestrians are crossing without hesitation or delay. Drivers are yielding to them. It's working very well as watching the video that we have. So I would not recommend an RFB at this time.
Okay. Item E, Mechanic Street, suggested angle parking by resident. Sample motion to place on file.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mary Lou McElwain?
Yes.
Steve Pesci?
Yes.
Mark Siracusa?
Yes.
Harold Whitehouse?
Yes.
Erica Wygonek?
Yes.
Police Captain Mike Maloney?
Yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice?
Yes.
City Manager Karen Connard?
Yes.
Chairman Andrew Bagley?
Yes. And now we have the speed limit working group presentation.
Tyler's not here, so I'm going to
Yes.
give you guys an update. Unrehearsed, here we go. So we have this organized by, I think, decisions. Oh, here we go. What's been accomplished and what our next focus is. And if we keep going. So as we talked about last time, we have reestablished neighborhood connectors as 25-mile-an-hour recommendations instead of 30-mile-an-hour recommendations. And I think if we go to the next slide, oh, probably, sorry.
Let me
I'll
just,
wait for you. Oh, thanks. Yeah. Right.
Team effort.
Thank you. I do the short stuff, so I appreciate. So we've also been looking at the neighborhood connector streets, as we've mentioned a couple times. We're trying to be pretty systematic about this, and not kind of jump from place to place. So with that change in the design guidelines, we've also evaluated the neighborhood connector streets to see what is in alignment with that new guideline, recommended guideline, and what's different. In general, I think we've adjusted pretty much all the neighborhood connector streets to come to alignment in some fashion. Islington and Middle Road have, we're doing 6-month trials at a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. South Street is one road that we're still working on, and I think that's probably obvious why we are, given the number of things that came up today, so we'll keep looking into that. A bunch of others are already at 25. There are a couple of neighborhood connectors streets that we are recommending to change to primary connectors. They have a target speed of 30 miles an hour, and this has to do with the nature of the roads and also the supportive treatment that would make sense on these roads. So Farm Lane and Rockingham Avenue connect directly to Spalding Turnpike, and really connect through to, I think it's Woodbury there, right?
Yes.
And so they don't feed into neighborhoods in the same way that our other neighborhood connectors do. The type of traffic that they're getting, the number of curb cuts on them, not only do we think they serve as primary connectors, but the type of pedestrian and bicycle treatment you would want to put on a road like this is more consistent with what one would see on a primary connector instead of a neighborhood connector street. So we think this is a better alignment for those roads. I don't know if anyone has questions about that, or I'll keep going. We also have a handful of neighborhood connector streets that we think really should be neighborhood slow streets. Neighborhood slow streets have a target speed of 20 miles an hour. And there's a handful of roads that had been classified as neighborhood connector streets that we really think are more functional as neighborhood slow streets. That's, they're not really getting you to a neighborhood, they're part of the neighborhood. And so instead of changing the speed limit from 20 to 25, we think it's more appropriate to change the category for those from neighborhood connector to neighborhood slow. And so that it starts to increase the consistency of the categories, the speeds, and the context of the roads. So these are just maps of the roads that we just mentioned. What comes What's next? We did that. Neighborhood connector streets. There are a couple of neighborhood connector streets that are currently posted at 20 that we recommend raising to 25. This is in accordance with how they're operating as neighborhood connector streets and not neighborhood slow streets. You know, they're accessing neighborhoods, they're getting you to neighborhoods. They do have some amount of through traffic on them. The context of the roads, again, looking at the number of curb cuts, the users of the road, and what supportive treatment for bicycle and pedestrians would be appropriate.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question now?
Yes.
Yeah. If you take into consideration the Cottage Street, which is where the senior center is, increasing it, from 20 to 25 miles an hour.
We did,
Yeah.
and all of these things are up for discussion if folks feel like it isn't appropriate. We do feel like it's not a 20 miles an hour is a very slow speed that's actually not in accordance with state law, and really is meant for kind of within a neighborhood. Cottage Street is a road that serves local land use, but also is serving traffic going through the road. And the amount of, you wouldn't think of it as a shared street where people would just walk down the street. That's kind of the sort of street that one would look at as a neighborhood slow street, where you would have that 20 mile an hour speed limit. Kind of a rule of thumb is if you feel like you would want a sidewalk to feel safe on that road, then we probably want it to be 20, it's a 25 mile an hour road. It's a neighborhood connector street. It's not a 20 mile an hour neighborhood slow street, I think, is one way to think about that.
But I was just concerned, did they take into consideration that this is where the senior center is? And they just opened up and they've got a lot of activity up there.
I think Steve has a...
Harold, I think the issue there is we do, and earlier commenter in public comments mentioned the sidewalks. I think that should be on the list for completing the continuity of the sidewalk system on Cottage Street. But if you look at the surrounding streets and the use of Cottage, it should not be a 20 mile per hour street. It should be, we think, appropriately a 25 mile per hour street with a completed sidewalk system.
We're working really hard to try and make sure there's this consistency and continuity with the context of the street and with the context of other streets. And so people know what the appropriate expectations are, and I think Steve summarized well the direction here. So those are decisions that or recommendations that we have. If we move on to the greens, where we're looking forward, we are looking into primary connectors in the same way that we've kind of comprehensively looked at the neighborhood connectors to look for alignment with the guidelines and make sure the context is all aligned. So primary connector roads include Ocean Road, Elwyn, Peverly Hill, Sagamore, Lafayette, Banfield, Newcastle, Lang Road. We are recommending adding Farm Lane and Rockingham Avenue to those. These have target speeds of 30 miles an hour. Many of them are already at 30. There are a couple of inconsistencies. I think that's the next slide. Peverly Hill and Elwyn Road are posted at 20. Both of those are in the middle of some plans for mixed-use paths and pedestrian bicycle treatment. And so what we'd like to do here, I think, for both of those is wait until those projects happen and monitor speeds and traffic and see what makes the most sense in those locations. Newcastle Ave is a little bit tricky. It's a primary connector. It's posted at 20 in some places. I think it's posted at 30 right along the bridge up into Newcastle. So this is one we're just starting to work on and think about, but is a tricky one.
Yeah, Newcastle is tricky because of the switch from City of Portsmouth to state to back to town of Newcastle. There's a lot of inconsistencies there, and obviously there's it is obviously a primary route, but also has a lot of ped bike traffic. So we need to do more thorough work on that and think about coordination with the three entities.
Yeah. But I think most of the others are already posted at 30, so that category is generally in pretty good shape, and I think we're moving towards resolving most of that. We've also continued exploring the idea of a downtown advisory speed zone. We're getting some, I guess, legal guidance in terms of what makes sense, what's allowed here. So, the rough idea is that we would advise that this is a dense pedestrian zone to keep speeds in the 20-mile-an-hour range. That's generally what people are already driving, but just to reinforce that again, you'll hear this theme from us every time. We're just trying to get consistency with the road context and what people should be doing and the speed limit and state law, and have that all be the same message.
And just to amplify what Eric is saying there, we did meet with constituents in the city and the city attorney. We're waiting, excuse me?
Assistant attorney?
Assistant attorney, thank you. And we're waiting for a response from the NHMA, New Hampshire Municipal Association, in regards to the concept. So this is still being discussed about positives and negatives and possibilities. So no recommendation yet at this point.
So in conclusion, our summary of our neighborhood connectors, we recommend reclassifying 2 of those streets as primary connectors instead of neighborhood connectors, reclassifying 4 of those streets to neighborhood slow streets, and adjusting speed limits of 3 of them to match the remainder of the neighborhood connectors. And those are recommendations. I think we need a motion on those. And then in general, our next steps are looking at the primary connectors and continuing to evaluate the idea of a downtown pedestrian speed zone. The end.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if I can make a comment, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Just as we look at adjusting perhaps speed limits throughout the city, I would recommend we have some type of formal mechanism so that the officers on the street know about these changes. For example, Middle Road. I can tell you that some of the officers that are out there saw the new 25 signs and they didn't know it had changed. So although they can see the sign and obviously they're out there every day running radar and they see that it's changed, it would be better for us to learn of a change in the speed limit by not reading it on a sign. And as we move forward to potentially tweak some or have pilot speed limit signs, whether it's minutes from this meeting or somehow just a way that the police department is aware of these changes and how they're going to take place. In fact, I wasn't aware that Middle Road change to 25 is a 6-month pilot. Is that correct? That's not permanent?
Yes, I think we discussed that at our last meeting.
Okay.
The idea that Middle and Islington right now, the speed data isn't clear that we can reduce the speed limit, so we're trying to do some temporary, a pilot to encourage lower speeds with traffic calming measures and simultaneously lower the speed limit to see if there's that changed behavior that we're looking for.
Okay. And how do all the city ordinance, all the speed limits are contained in city ordinance. So if there's a change determined in this committee, how quickly does the city ordinance get changed?
We do the omnibus, so doesn't that help us out where we kind of gives us a trial?
Yes, any measure that's adopted by this committee and then approved by city council can be implemented on a trial basis for up to a year.
Okay.
And then if it's successful, then it would go forward for 3 readings to become an official ordinance.
Because the officers actually use those city ordinances frequently on the road. We have apps on our phone that we can access all the city ordinances. So if there's something that an officer doesn't know, they actually consult those city ordinances quite a bit for speed limits. So if those are...
Mr. Chair, if I may add, in terms of clarity from the legal side, I think you're best waiting for the ordinance to actually be changed before you do enforcement. Reason being, there is some discussion or difference of opinion whether the temporary enactment by City Council is something that is acceptable if it get challenged. So it is I think for now, we're better off using the judgment of, these are, it's almost a pilot, and we're doing it, we're seeing if we're affecting change, but in terms of legal action, I think you're better off, to not be challenged by having it clearly in the ordinance.
Okay. Fair enough. Thank you.
So that would be on a trial? Excuse me. You done?
Yes.
Anything that doesn't go through the ordinance change.
Okay, so you're saying this can't be enforced at this point?
I'm saying that until a lawsuit is brought to that point, we will not have clear definition.
It's murky.
Let's hope that doesn't happen.
What's your motion?
I'm not making any motion at the moment.
So
This was just a discussion to,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Melanie.
before
I
we
really commend the work that has been done by the subcommittee. It's just amazing how detailed it is and how complicated it is. And I think it's a great start to get the speed limits lowered or consistent throughout the city. And I'm not sure if you've gotten feedback from residents in the community, because I haven't seen this in the newspaper. I haven't seen these changes written up by Jeff McMenemy or anybody. So I'm wondering if there's been a
There has been feedback, and the feedback has been positive. People noticed that the signs went from 30 to 25, and they actually commented that they thought there was going to be a lot of people in uproar. And all the feedback I've seen so far is actually, no, we are happy with you lowering the speed limit,
Great.
even if it may not actually help. They admire the effort. What I'm a little concerned about is in the places, particularly where we're going from 20 to 30 miles per hour, I don't think we're going to see such positive feedback.
Yeah.
So I think we should be cautious with those.
Where we find that some of the inconsistencies are streets that should be increased incrementally. And, first blush, that's not as popular a thing to do, but what we as a committee have been trying to do is stay fixed on the classification, the neighborhood, and the posting, so that there's a logical connectivity and consistency between all of them. So now we're going to get into these recommendations where a couple of them should be raised. We're trying to stick to our logic and protocol. Of course, in the end, it's the council's decision on that, but we're trying to provide recommendations based on principles and logic and, the legal precedent.
Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Yeah.
I too commend the efforts, and I think it's long overdue. I think the challenge will be those streets that, if you're signing them, if you're taking signs down and not re-signing them, that's one thing. If you're actually taking sign down and putting up a faster speed limit, there will be some reaction. What I would recommend is that prior to asking council to vote, a presentation is given to city council so that it is clear what they are voting on.
Good.
Because what happens sometimes is it's not always clear what PTS actions are being done, and there's claim of foul. So I would to be effective in this case, to communicate it clearly, I think a presentation to council before any changes were made. And I think we should think as a committee whether leaving sleeping dogs, lying, maybe, or doing it incrementally as roads are changed, maybe the better approach. But that's for the committee to decide.
City Manager.
Mr. Chairman, perhaps a step for the PTS to consider would be to re-notice this presentation, make it clear that we're looking for feedback at the next PTS meeting or at a PTS meeting before this goes to council. Because if I would imagine the council would want to know what feedback PTS got, and I think we should give it due notice at a meeting. I don't know if July is the best meeting. It's sort of the peak of the summer. I would defer to this group. But
would you consider a night meeting for that?
I would consider a night meeting for that. I think would PTS consider a night meeting for that? I think that might be appropriate.
Yeah. Harold?
In any motion that I would support is the word pilot program has to be used in the motion.
We love
I think
pilots.
It's very important.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, Erica?
At what point do we think we should, so we're doing our best to kind of every month be making sure we're bringing recommendations. I think Tyler's doing a good job of making sure we're not just talking and actually getting to some sort of decisions. But so I mean, with hope, we will have more recommendations next month. I don't think, I mean, do we want to wait until, I don't know when we're going to finish. At this rate, it's like 2 months per category? I don't know.
It's an amazing amount of incremental work, but we're not in any rush. You know, it's not like we get points for fixing some of these incongruencies that have been there for 25 years. What does another month matter? But I think maybe we could pull together work to date and show to the council in a streamlined thing, this is what is in progress right now as a pilot. Here's pending recommendations. You know, try to get that boiled down, or do it here. Sorry, in an evening. We could do that in an evening. Maybe we pause and let people digest where we are, and then one slide that talks about next steps.
What if we just draw a line at neighborhood connectors? That's, you know, we've, I think, not quite finished, but mostly finished. Sorry, I just started to connect.
That's fine.
Okay, sorry. Drawing a line at neighborhood connectors and treating that as like a coherent packet of information to present. I don't know if it makes sense to get into what we're doing next or not, or just kind of this, we've kind of finished that section, so maybe that's a time that we can pause and share it, because I do feel like we're just gonna keep having stuff. I don't want to, like, I do think we kind of need to, there needs to be a break at where we're sharing.
Okay, so how about we come back with this proposal, but with a motion attached to it, that we'd be looking for public input.
At a July PTS meeting.
At a July PTS meeting, possibly in the evening, but not July 4th timeframe, because that would defeat the purpose.
Yep.
And then, you know, we can raise some awareness to people, because I think, as we found, you know, lowering speed limits is a kind of an easy win. There's not a lot of people against it, at least that live on those streets. I think raising speed limits, we're going to really want to hear from the public, because we're going to hear from them after we do it, if we don't allow for it beforehand.
So, Mr. Chairman, I think this is a great opportunity to really highlight the work that is done to determine these changes, and any of the parking, traffic, and safety changes that we do. This is not these aren't arbitrary decisions. These are things that are done, you know, with rigorous evaluation, engineering, looking at guidelines and actual data. You know, we don't just arbitrarily take a book off and say, well, that's what we're going to do. We take actual data, including hours and hours of video. And I think it's a good opportunity to highlight that for the general public, so they understand that there is a process, there are rules, there are things, and there is thought that goes behind this. And how do we get to the determination that something can go down slower, or something really should be higher? And what types of treatments can you do? And talk about the resources that are online already for people to look at through this committee. So I think it's a great opportunity. Whether we truncate it to just one area or not, I don't really feel strongly one way or the other on that. But I would suggest maybe for the July meeting, if the regular daytime, that we come back with a proposed presentation, or at least, you know, a firm, solid outline of that for that next meeting, so that everybody understands what we're going to talk about at that meeting, and fine-tune it if needed.
Okay, and so with the primary connectors, we're thinking of not bringing that back for clarity.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends when we have a night meeting,
Okay.
when we want to bring this to the public. We're still just kind of getting started with the primary connectors. I don't know that we have we haven't brought any recommendations for primary connectors yet as a category. We are recommending changing some neighborhood connectors to primary connectors, but that means we're not really planning to adjust them until we evaluate the primary connectors.
Because I'm looking at the slide with Beverly Hill Road, Elwyn Road, and Newcastle Avenue, and I'm worried those particular roads might overwhelm the conversation about
Yeah, we're
the
not
whole
talking
project. So let's not bring those into the mix, maybe at the first. Yeah, let's just leave those off.
And this is something we're just reviewing and talking about right now. There's no decision at this point. I know, I live on Newcastle Avenue. You go in 30, you feel like you're going really fast. I mean, it's not something that you're comfortable, unless you get on the other side of the river.
I think
there's a short section of Newcastle Ave, which is what is really the city's purview.
The part in
From
question
south to.
goes from like the
to
Marcy.
Pleasant Point.
The
or the
south
island.
to Pleasant Point, I think is, I don't remember the categorization, but I don't think is in this category. But I think the primary connector starts at the end of Pleasant Point out to Newcastle.
Right. And that kind of definition, or that distinction, doesn't really get seen by anybody.
Yeah.
So they just see it as being, oh, you're going to increase this, everybody's going to go flying down this little road.
Right. Yeah, it's not.
So I think that's a good idea that we look to schedule something in the evening in July, and that we leave those particular streets out of the discussion at this time, because we really want to focus on, as Peter said, that this is a methodical process that's done with studies and engineering data and things like that, and try to take as much emotional, because of the challenges of those particular streets already have, out of the equation, so that everybody understands that we're looking at it in a very analytical approach.
Well, I think if we, focusing on the neighborhood connector streets, which are the ones that we've finished, I think if in the public meeting, like the dedicated public meeting, focus on the method and the neighborhood connector streets, I think that's plenty of content. And I think will illustrate the process that we're going through. I don't think there are quite as many hornet's nests in the neighborhood connector streets, but I think there's important things to talk about. So I think that would be a good package of information to discuss. Maybe we'll have made some progress on the primary connectors by then, but two of them we're not going to do anything with until the project is done. So, we might pause on the neighborhood connectors anyway.
Okay. So do we need a motion to do this, or do we want to?
I don't think so.
Okay, so we'll.
You've given us some direction.
Yeah, we've got
and
some direction,
we'll
and then
work with the city
yeah.
staff.
Special meeting of the Traffic Parking Safety Committee before next month? Before?
It'd be in July.
It'd be in
After
July.
our next
After the
meeting.
4th.
Okay, yeah.
Later,
So-
later in July.
Yeah.
We'll talk and whatever you guys come up with, and then we'll present it and make sure it's a well-noticed meeting and everything. That
Yep. And we realize this does get a little mind-numbing, this stuff, but we're working
well,
through it.
I think we all appreciate that you guys are doing all this work, because it's not easy work, and the pay is not very good.
Excuse me. I just want to
Really?
comment on our July evening date. July is such a vacation month. I think you'll get feedback from residents saying, "Whew, July? You're going to give this information to us in July?" Just be careful.
Yeah,
You know?
I think.
Better.
Yeah, we're just.
It seems everybody gets out of town in July.
I don't think there's any good
Summer.
time for meetings like
Summer,
this. Somebody's
yeah.
going to always be inconvenienced. So I think if we avoid the July 4th week, obviously,
Yeah.
that would. But I don't think we can really pick a good time.
Our next regular PTS meeting is July 7th.
Uh-huh.
Okay. So we're running a little bit over time here, so let's try and speed up through. So old business, Islington Street at Jewel Court, request do not block intersection by resident. Sample motion to move and place on file. If anybody wants to make that motion?
Oh. I thought there was more talk about that.
Well, let's make a motion and then we can discuss.
It's on file?
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Okay, and discussion?
I think that is a crazy, go ahead. It is a crazy intersection, and I think we've talked about this before, of putting the do not block. I'm not sure what the problem is with not putting that.
Yes, I could address that. So we have the new signal we have at the intersection of Bartlett and Islington provides video of that location, that intersection of Jewel Court as well. So I've watched a lot of peak hour video when the traffic is the heaviest at that location. You have 1,000 cars an hour going through that intersection, but the left turns into Jewel Court are only 20 cars. It's very low left turn volume into Jewel Court, and most of those cars are coming off of Bartlett Street.
Right.
Because as you can see, traffic coming out of town on Islington has a chance to make a left on Albany Street to get into that neighborhood, and that's what they're doing rather than coming through the signal and then trying to make a left into Jewel. So the predominant flow is the 20 cars an hour coming out of Bartlett Street and then making a left. And out of those 20 cars an hour, watching the video, 17 of them are making that movement without a problem. there's only a few cars an hour that are actually having to wait. And then when that happens, the worst backup I saw was 3 or 4 cars behind them making that right turn. And that right turn from Bartlett Street is allowed to be, it's a right on red. They get a right when the left turn is going from Islington Street. The only time they can make a right just about any time they want. So it doesn't really slow them up too much. And and the way the signal works also is that left turn, after the right turn comes out of Bartlett Street, and say they're stopped to make a left into Jewel and they're blocked, well, that very next movement of the signal is a left turn arrow for that Islington Street onto Bartlett. So that clears up that blockage on that Islington Street approach, and those left turns are able to get through. And then what happens after that left turn goes to red, you have the green light for the traffic on Islington Street. And so if you were to put a do not block box there, you would have the left lane stopping to allow a gap, but then the through lane has a green light. So if you were to make a left turn across the stop traffic, you would be trying to cross a lane that is not stopped. So it's a dangerous situation where you're allowing traffic to cross one lane, not realizing that both lanes are not stopped. That's why I'm not recommending that we do the do not block box here, because the way the phasing is operating on that signal, you don't have both lanes stopped at the same time. And it's not a heavy movement, and I'm not seeing it causing a lot of backups. I mean, it does occasionally, but it's not predominantly, and it's not a significant backup when it does happen. So I think you're trying to solve a solution, but it's creating other problems inadvertently by that through traffic having the green light and not having to stop for the box.
Move to place on file.
Second?
Yeah, I think, the public comment was split on this, where people wanted it and people didn't want it, and now we're hearing from the experts that it doesn't make sense. So I think this is a fairly straightforward one.
I'm not going to vote against the motion, but for the record, I mean, ideally, Jewel Court wouldn't be there at that, and it's really a mess due to prior generations' decisions.
Yeah, it's all great to say, well, we should have, we oughta, but the reality is, we don't own those properties.
Yeah.
So,
No, someday,
that's what we got.
someday, hopefully, we can change that.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a roll call vote, please.
Mary Lou McElwain?
Yes.
Steve Pesci?
Yes.
Mark Siracusa?
Yes.
Harold Whitehouse?
Yes.
Erica Wygonek?
Yes.
Police Captain Mike Maloney?
Yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice?
Yes.
Chairman Andrew Bagley?
Yes. Now we're on to H, McKinley Road, Harrison Avenue, and Garfield intersections. Request for an all-way stop and and crosswalk by resident. Sample motion. Move to recommend implementation of proposed improvements in Alta study as funding allows.
I'm going to, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Mr. Chairman, I think prior to making this motion, there should be an update to the neighborhood as to the status of the plans and programs, and making it clear that that this would be something that would be done. I think there'd be some confusion. There's already a lot of concern relative to moving forward, and I wouldn't want to take action without the neighborhood being made aware.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah. This is similar to what Peter's saying, so I'm going to make a friendly amendment. Move to refer the Elmwood Park McKinley Road Sidewalk Capital Improvement Project public comment and input process. So to take up this idea, as a resident, I like the idea, but as a committee member, I agree with Peter that there are going to be public input and comment sessions coming up in the future, and people will be able to weigh on what they would like to see. And so the friendly amendment would be to refer to the Elmwood Park McKinley Road Sidewalk Capital Improvement Project public comment and input process.
So if I could reword that, make this part of the project, and don't take action independent of the project.
I think that's a simpler motion. Do you agree with that, Mark? Just that we would place on file until the CIP project comes forward?
Yeah, we'll roll it into it's part of the project.
Yeah, it's part of the project, but other people would like to be heard on their ideas. And if someone I'm just looking at continuity here.
Right, we're just,
We agree,
Mark,
we agree with what you're saying, Mark.
Yeah.
It's just how we're wording it. It's
Okay. All right.
we're basically placing it on file until the project in its entirety comes forward, is my understanding.
There is a concern that, people have ideas and they want to be heard. And a resident did come forward through the PTS with their idea, which is great. And as a resident, I agree with it. I like the idea. But since there is a process, a capital improvement process for the public, that we should be using that instead of the PTS to approve it.
I withdraw my motion, and I'll say move to place on file.
Second.
Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Mary Lou McElwain?
Yes.
Steve Pesci?
Yes.
Mark Siracusa?
Yes.
Harold Whitehouse?
Yes.
Erica Wygonick?
Yes.
Police Captain Mike Maloney?
Yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice?
Yes.
Chairman Andrew Bagley?
Yes. And then I, Maplewood Avenue at Dennett Street, report back on request for RRFB.
Yes, we've been collecting video data at the intersection and seeing, we're certainly having a substantial amount of pedestrian activity, about 15 pedestrians an hour at the peak times. The Weeble in the intersection is working well. I mean, traffic for the most part yields. You do get some traffic that's coming down the hill or out of town at a greater rate of speed who aren't necessarily stopping every time. So, I mean, this intersection is very busy, a lot of activity going on, side streets and driveways, pedestrians, bicycles. So, this could be a location where an RFB could make sense. The existing crosswalk is going into a driveway on one side. It really needs to be brought up to standards with tip-down ramps in the sidewalk, so you're getting pedestrian traffic out of driveways. So it does need some additional work, and RFB may be an appropriate measure to implement at this location.
Move to have further evaluation done by staff and report back.
I'll second that. We've been in it a long time.
Any discussion? Mary Lou? No? No, okay. Roll call vote, please.
Mary Lou McElwain?
Yes.
Steve Pesci?
Yes.
Mark Siracusa? Harold Whitehouse?
Yes.
Erica Wygonick?
Yes.
Police Captain Mike Maloney?
Yes.
Public Works Director Peter Rice?
Yes.
Chairman Andrew Bagley?
Yes. And then final in old business is J, Maplewood Avenue pedestrian signal operations report back.
Okay, I don't have anything in the packet on this, but we have looked at additional hours. We collected another 4 days worth of video out there, and we've been watching the video and even got Leela involved this time. So we aren't seeing the pedestrians being cut off by the vehicles as the concerns. It's operating as correctly as it should. I did see one instance where a vehicle cut in front of a pedestrian, but that pedestrian waved the vehicle on. It was an older person who was slowly getting across the street and said, "Oh, come on, you can go first," and they let them through. Other than that, the drivers are yielding as they should. They're turning behind the pedestrians. Not seeing safety concerns out there. It's operating as it should, and doesn't seem to be the confusion. I mean, drivers get impatient. They honk their horns because they don't know why they're having to wait for a pedestrian, but they are doing it. It's working as it should. So, we've collected additional data. We can continue to collect additional data, but we really haven't seen it. We've looked at over 100 hours now of video, and we're just not seeing the conflicts that have been raised as a concern.
Mary Lou?
Yes, thank you. This is a hot button for me because it happens to me too frequently, and I see it happening to other people, that traffic coming from Congress, turning right on Maplewood, come across their crosswalk and come right up to the next crosswalk. And that's happened to me 3 times in April at Congress Street and at Deer Street. So until the light stays red while pedestrians are crossing, I think that these are problematic intersections, and it's anecdotal. So.
Any other comments? So I mean, this is a challenging one because there's anecdotal. It's been a big change that a lot of people don't like, but the engineering data and the survey data supports that the change is working as it's supposed to be. So I don't know that we can, we kind of have to go with what the data and the engineering people tell us as
Well, maybe.
makes sense.
Excuse me.
Oh, go ahead.
The light turns green after the pedestrian icon turns to 15. That's not enough time. I'm just barely, and I'm not a slow walker, across there when even a flatbed trailer came from Congress turning right on Maplewood and came right up, and I just feel threatened by those, and they're chomping at the bit to get past where I'm crossing. Or with others. I saw it happen yesterday. I saw two people, younger people, dash across at Congress and Maplewood because a car was coming to turn right. So I think that there needs to be a change, that there shouldn't be a green light while the pedestrian light is on. That's my take on this.
Any other comments?
We've discussed this so many times, unbelievable.
Yeah, I think, we have, I wouldn't want to say limited resources, but we have a lot of streets in the city to monitor, and
I get
don't
it.
know
I
that
just
we
want
can
to comment
continue.
on my
Yeah, no,
concerns.
I when it first changed, I was against it, but I walk that intersection every day, and once all the changes to the lights were where the pedestrian gets the go signal before the cars get the green light, so that you're actually into the intersection before they're moving. I think it works.
Unless they're standing
But I know
there.
that's not everyone agrees, but I think the intersection works as intended, and I'm not a traffic engineer, so when traffic engineers and research studies tell me it works, and then we study that specific intersection and the video says that it works, I got to go with the science on this one.
Yeah, the problem we see sometimes is, like you said, the pedestrians are not paying attention to the signal. It gives them the walk signal, and they don't realize that by the time they step off the curb, it's
That's right.
already started the countdown.
That does happen, but it didn't happen to me. I was
Yeah.
crossing, ready to cross.
Yeah.
3 times in 1 month it happened, and I just don't go there.
Yeah, the pedestrian gets a 7-second advance before the drivers get their green light, so it gets them out into
Right,
the
and if they're
crosswalk.
chomping on the bit, they're right at the crosswalk where the pedestrian is.
Yeah, and there's a no turn on red sign. There's a yield to pedestrian signs. I mean, drivers will, no matter what situation we have, drivers are going to disregard signs. And,
Right,
this
but the
is
light turns green while the pedestrian light is on. That's my point.
yes, as a common practice.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
now we have, I don't think we need a motion or anything on that. That was for informational.
Yeah.
Informational items. A, monthly accident report from police.
So we had 59 total crashes in April, 33 of those being reportable, 0 accidents involving bicycles, 1 involving a pedestrian. When I look at I think I read these numbers on a monthly basis, but we don't necessarily see what these numbers mean or appreciate what these numbers mean all the time. But when you think of the amount of vehicles in our city every day and the amount of people in our city every day, to have 33 reportable crashes in a month is quite remarkable, and it speaks to the enforcement efforts that our officers are out there doing on a day-to-day basis. When you look at 33 crashes over 4 weeks roughly, that boils down to maybe 1 reportable crash a day for a city that has a tremendous amount of pedestrian and vehicle population. So I'm glad to see those numbers. I'm not a knock on wood type guy, but just last week we had a staff meeting and they put out 8 reportable crashes for last week. So hopefully that stays on trend, even in April when we're starting to see more people and vehicles. Overall, from month to month, our crashes, and more importantly, our crashes with injuries, are where we like to see them. And that's due to the efforts of the police officers out there being very highly visible. So that's it.
Great, thank you. And I will say that is one of the most common requests is, we like to see the police officers out there as much as possible, and I think you guys are doing a great job.
Thank you.
So we have, I keep scrolling back and forth. I should have printed out the agenda. Roadway projects in June?
Yes, this information is a memo in the packet just describing the projects that are coming up. If you haven't seen it, we'll be doing work. Work is ongoing right now on Harvard, Princeton, and Dodge Avenue. And we'll be doing the final paving on Islington Street. The construction that was done the last couple of years, that will get its final coat of pavement. Out on Marcy Street, there's a lot of gas line work, and then that will be paved after the gas line work is done. Bridge Street lot is reopened after its reconstruction. There's some electrical contracting work going on Ladd Street. They were on Market Street the past couple of weeks, and now they're moved to Ladd Street. And so that is closed except for access to the parking garage. And Kate Street and Bartlett Street intersection will be finalized the construction with the median island and new crosswalks and RRFBs, and that will be in accordance with the plan that was approved by City Council last fall. So that will be coming up next by the end of the month.
Great. And there is, for the garage, I know that's not roadworks, but there's a public meeting, I believe, coming up.
Yes, on the 9th.
So if anybody's interested in what we're doing at the High Hanover Garage, there's a chance to learn more about that exciting project.
Exciting.
And I think that does it for informational items. Is there any miscellaneous? Steve?
Just in response to the one comment about Little Harbor Road, could we at a future meeting, July, August, get a report on Little Harbor Road and next steps, just to respond to that, Speaker?
We can. I thought we had reported back and made, and there were recommendations, and I thought that the decision was that there would be no action taken.
Okay.
Yeah,
But I would need to pull back and.
I believe that we were going to re-monitor it in the summertime
I
with
thought we
heavy
were going
traffic.
to remeasure or something, yeah.
After the paving also?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, after final paving?
Yeah.
Because we had paving done and we did monitoring. We reported back on the changes in speed.
And then I think we were going to wait for peak season this year to collect some more data. So maybe that's all I'm asking, that we
Yes.
remember to do that.
Yep.
And then in the fall report back. And then I would love to see the mini roundabouts thing in the fall. There's no time crisis. We developed some standards and thoughts about a pilot on that.
There seems to be some consensus anyway on mini roundabouts.
And if committee members feel like they would like to add an item to the agenda to cover that, that'd be fine.
They often make good alternatives to four-way stops.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Erica?
We have a fantastic crossing guard. We have, in general, fantastic crossing guards. One commented to me this morning that they would love it if the waste collection could be delayed until after the school time.
Nope.
I guess they've observed a lot of close calls, and they knew I was on the way to parking traffic safety, so they asked that I mention it, so I'm mentioning
I
it.
appreciate that concern. Our staff is very, very cognizant of kids, and they do a great job. If anything, I would encourage people to pay more attention to them, because they've had many very, very close near accidents, and we've had an actual accident that a gentleman lost his leg. So it's a very dangerous profession.
Yeah.
And I appreciate people's concerns, but we are a very well-run, tight organization when it comes to picking up stuff. There's not a lot of room to push off,
Yeah.
pick up for a couple hours.
The school board have final decisions on the crossing guards, the appointments?
The appointment of them? No.
No?
No, it's parking traffic. It's the parking division that supplies the
Okay.
at the request of the school department.
They're all great, by the way. They're all great.
Mary Lou?
Yes, at next meeting, can we talk about the parking and traffic situation on Penn Hollow, Daniel, with the continued construction? Because it's not going to let up in any fast. And I'm just commenting that the trucks are parking.
Sure, but it's,
where-
Mary Lou, there's no benefit to talking about it, because by the time we're talking about it and we get done, they're working to get done. They're going to be off the streets.
They've got to do the interior. My comment is, why can't the city request that these trucks that sit there all day long park at the lot at the end of State Street near the bridge, instead of taking up places where businesses require some parking?
I will comment that I did speak to some business owners in the area, and I don't forget the gentleman's name, but they said the problem's gotten much better because there's somebody out there telling the trucks to move along now, especially the big box trucks that park in front of shops. But I think, Director Rice is correct. It's it's going to be an ongoing problem that we just need to stay on top of on the ground, and I don't know that.
My point is, we don't need to pile on. We already know that this is an issue. We're already on top of it. We're already constantly day to day dealing with it. So just having that additional, fervor will not assist in what we're doing already.
I just want to say that the businesses are affected by the pickup truck, the construction trucks.
Sure.
They're sitting there all day long.
With all due respect, Mary Lou, I get emails from the businesses every day.
I bet.
I'm very much aware of the impacts. So all I'm saying is that we do not need, as a committee, to take it up and to kind of...
I'm making a comment about it, Peter. I'm making a comment as a member of this committee.
Sure.
That we should be paying attention to the businesses, and if the city is doing it, we need more information on that, because I think it's a big concern.
I'm explaining to you that you asked to make it a topic, that we do not need to do that topic. If you'd like
Let's not make it a topic. We've already made it a topic.
All right, well, I think we're a bit over time, and that's kind of the, we're trying to keep these meetings to 2 hours.
That's right.
So if we put too much on the agenda,
If we could get,
we don't get through everything.
that's right.
Yeah,
So-
Mr. Chairman, I move we adjourn.
We have a
Okay.
second?
I'll second.
And I think we need a roll call vote.
All right. Mary Lou McElwain. Steve Pesci. Mark Siracusa.
Yes.
Harold Whitehouse. Erica Wygonik.
Yes.
Director Peter Rice.
Yes.
Chairman Andrew Bagley.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you, everyone.
Harold.
I didn't say a word. Haven't said-